The EU attack on Elon Musk confirms their next step could be to freeze your savings next. While people speculate that the price of Bitcoin is getting attacked through TradFi's manipulation, something way more sinister may be underway. This disturbing pattern of red flags all point to dystopian levels of censorship, and while some might allege that these are tinfoil hat conspiracies, we might only be a few steps away from total dystopia, because remember, without freedom of speech, there is no freedom to transact. Bitcoin! Welcome back to Satoshi.
Today, the Commission has issued a fine of 120 million euro to X for breaching the Digital Services Act. This is the first ever fine under the DSA. X has indeed breached its transparency obligation under the DSA. This includes X's blue checkmark. It deceives users. Anyone can pay to obtain the verified status. And X does not meaningfully verify who is behind it. It also includes X advertising repository, which does not work properly. And X doesn't provide effective data access for researchers. Failure to comply with the non-compliance decision may lead to periodic penalty payments on top of today's fine.
December 5th, 2025, the European Union fines Elon Musk's X 120 million euros, about $140 million, for breaching their Orwellian Digital Services Act. In other words, allowing too much free speech. The EU says it's about transparency and public protection, but come on. This is the same wannabe authoritarian regime that's been pushing for backdoors into your messages for years. Elon fired back, blasting the EU and tweeting on X, "How long before the EU is gone? Abolish the EU." So based. And this idea of abolishing the EU, abolishing the centralization of governments, is so reminiscent of Bitcoin, which is completely based on decentralization. This is a drum he's been banging for a while, actually, since he called the EU headquarters a giant cathedral to bureaucracy.
And to be totally frank, EU headquarters in Brussels is essentially a giant cathedral to bureaucracy.
A comment that was likely sparked by European governments' threat to fine Elon on the down low if he didn't comply with their censorship demands. Looks like they finally made good on their threat.
There should be a lot of things done. We should be, in my view, repealing something called Section 230, which gave platforms on the internet immunity because they were thought to be just pass-throughs, that they shouldn't be judged for the content that is posted. But we now know that that was an overly simple view, that if the platforms, whether it's Facebook or Twitter X or Instagram or TikTok, whatever they are, if they don't moderate and monitor the content, we lose total control.
Back in the US, here at home, just a day earlier on December 4th, the Trump administration ordered the State Department officials to deny H-1B visas to fact-checkers, content moderators, and anyone involved in combating disinformation. Tech workers from abroad barred if they've ever flagged hate speech or misinformation. Is this about protecting the borders, purging dissent, or is it about making sure foreign entities don't interfere with free speech in the US? Civil liberties advocates warn that the definitions used can be vague and might risk political targeting under the pretext of national security.
Fighting disinformation always means censorship. It ultimately leads to a thing that I call spiral of totalitarianism. Because at the beginning, you have this great idea how to make a world a better place. So you tell people what to say and what to think, and they don't do it. Then you have to start to be a little bit rougher. So you start censoring those people who doesn't want to say what you want them to say. But they keep doing it. Then you start to kicking them from jobs and somehow cancel them for saying it, but they still keep doing it. So there is no other way than putting them to jail or punish them by the law somehow. But some people still doing it. And then, oops, all of a sudden you have a totality, and it's ultimately followed by cultural and economical decline in the end. And hopefully, one day, after several decades, by a revolt that will restart the system again.
So where does Bitcoin fit in the war against censorship? The most obvious example that comes to mind recently is Samurai Wallet and the arrests of their founders Keon Rodriguez and William Hill. In April 2024, these legendary devs were raided and jailed for building a non-custodial Bitcoin mixer, which is a tool that lets you anonymize transactions. Now, they've just been sentenced to years in prison for conspiracy to operate an unlicensed money transmitting business. But their real crime? Writing open source software that governments couldn't spy on. Not holding funds, not transmitting money, just writing code.
I'll go back to when I find out I'm sitting in the jail at this point, and the public defender tells me what the charges are: conspiracy to launder money and conspiracy to operate a money service business without a license. I look at her and go, well, how can that be? Right? Like, I've never taken anyone's money. How can I transmit money if I never took any money? And, as I launder and transmit, how is that possible? I thought you needed to actually take the money to do that. And she goes, well, they have tweets. I said, what do you mean they have tweets? What does that mean? She goes, well, you apparently, invited Russian oligarchs to use Samurai Wallet. Like, I laughed.
They got you on tweets. They got you on tweets is what
they got me. I mean,
the Russia hoax continues.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah,
tweets
they were excited about it. Yeah.
Tweets is the evidence. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I'm
yes.
sorry. I have to ask, how did they get these tweets? Were they taken from your phone that you willingly gave to them?
No. These were public. These were made on Twitter. So they were following the Samurai Wallet account.
So, okay,
look,
okay. So we're talking about a country that supposedly has free speech. So you said some things on the internet.
Right. Yeah, which were obviously jokes.
Publicly on the internet.
Yeah, publicly on the internet.
Continue.
Which were obviously jokes, right? And in fact, kind of go to our, intent, because if we were actually operating a criminal money laundering enterprise,
it's a branding thing. It's a branding thing, idiots. Like,
exactly.
I mean, sorry, but I just have to just for a second, just sort of like be a little comical here. It's like, how idiotic do you have to be to believe that you can have a system where someone can come in and say, no, you're in trouble because you said some shit here and I can see it. And you're talking about a public social network that people use all the time for all kinds of stuff in a free speech country. Like,
yeah. It's called a shit post, right?
There you go. It's called a shit post for anybody important up the ladder that needs to understand what these are.
Here's the tweet, right? So there was I forgot what it was, some draconian government overreach, in my view, that said, these sanctions are going to go against Russian oligarchs and they're not going to be allowed to use the financial system, something along those lines. And I retweeted that and said, welcome new Russian oligarch Samurai Wallet users, right? So this is the tweet that really got the U.S. Attorney's Office going, okay? But if you search on Samurai Wallet's Twitter for welcome new, you'll find 15 different welcome new users, right? Like, so one of which was when the Federal Reserve of the United States made it against policy for their employees to trade Bitcoin. I quote tweeted that and said, welcome new Federal Reserve Samurai Wallet users.
So it's clearly a branding thing. It's clearly a branded joke comment that you use in these situations that identify the problem in the world and how your product serves that need. It's very common in business to do this. You call out an issue, you say, this is how my product fixes the issue. Continue. Right.
So that was, that was in that first indictment, really their big gotcha. Right. And then they had some screenshots from a investor deck that I made in 2015 where I was trying to raise investment for Samurai Wallet. And in one of the slides, there was the words gray market and illicit activity, but they had no context to what this slide was about. Right. The slide actually was about talking about what the global economy is, and the global economy, sorry to break it to the U.S. Attorney's Office, the largest market in the world is the black market. It dwarfs everything.
Which is what runs that? What is the currency? Cash, dollars, ladies and gentlemen.
Right. So they had no context to this slide. at all because it was just a slide. And they got this slide from a subpoena.
How ironic. How ironic is that they're saying that they got you on a slide that's talking about their own money. That was what your slide was referring to, was their money, not your product.
Correct. So, you know, just having that word there was a big deal to them. And that was essentially it. In that first indictment, that was essentially it. So, I mean, I looked at this and I laughed, right? Because even with that laughable evidence, just the fact that they can claim that I transmitted money when they know perfectly well that I never had the money.
Core of your product is that you don't have the money. That is literally the product, is that you have no custody over anything, and that the consumer keeps the custody.
Yeah, and I knew at that time, because we had lawyers who looked at this stuff, we knew what the regulator in charge of money transmission, FinCEN, had to say about this since 2013. And 2019, they repeated it. They said, in order to be a money transmitter, you have to have custody. If you don't have custody, you can't be a money transmitter.
Pretty logical.
Pretty logical advice and guidance from a regulator.
And speaking of getting spied on, this is my data broker report. 11 pages. 11. They know every old address I've lived at, phone numbers, family members, even what kind of car I drive. It's insane. That's why today's video is sponsored by Aura. Scammers, spammers, even stalkers can just buy your personal info, and it's totally legal and so dystopian. Aura hunts down the data broker selling your info, gets them to take it down, and keeps it off automatically. You don't have to go full off-grid Bitcoin mystic and live in a Faraday cage because Aura lets you keep your modern life and your privacy. Aura has packed it all in. Real-time dark web and fraud alerts, a secure VPN, antivirus, password manager, 24/7 US-based support, and $5 million in identity theft insurance if anything goes wrong. No other privacy service gives you this many tools for the same price. Try it free for 14 days at aura.com/simplybitcoin. Protecting your Bitcoin in self-custody is necessary, but protecting yourself? That's non-negotiable. Go to aura.com/simplybitcoin and take your privacy back. All right, Aura protects you, but now let's talk about protecting your Bitcoin future, because stacking sats gets a whole lot easier when your miners are working for you and not against you. Would you mine Bitcoin if it were as easy as buying it? Then you should check out Sazmining. It's not hosted mining, it's mining as a service that actually puts Bitcoiners first. You can own a state-of-the-art mining rig, plug into affordable carbon-free energy, and stack Bitcoin just like Satoshi. No middlemen, no markups, and no worries. Saz doesn't tack on extra fees when you sign up, and unlike other companies, there are no rig upcharges or inflated power rates. Their entire business model is based on a clean and simple revenue share. They only earn Bitcoin if you are too. A total alignment of incentives and 100% Bitcoiner values. While some claim simplicity, Sazmining proves it. Let's just say that if you need a compass to find your miners, you're not in the right place. This is how Bitcoin mining should have always been done. Visit sazmining.com or scan the QR code to learn more and start hashing.
Calling self-custody crypto anarchism oversimplifies Bitcoin's innovation to empower the individual. Bitcoin's not about rejecting the government. From the highest form possible, Bitcoin is information. Bitcoin is text. Bitcoin is about free speech. Bitcoin is about property rights. Bitcoin is about the freedom to manage your own money, your own property, your own time, your own energy, your own labor, effort, your own future. The point is that you get to decide for the first time ever in human history, especially in modern human history, whether you want to trust and rely on anyone to store your time and energy, your money, your effort, your labor. It's not. It's drastic oversimplification to call it crypto anarchism, to elect and decide to take no counterparty risk to store, save, and exchange your labor, effort, and future. So that's for one. For two, I think the comments around gold and the executive order, listen, if the gold executive order was voluntary, it would have been it would have been an executive suggestion. It wasn't voluntary. It was an order. It was an order backed by enforcement. I think it's a little dangerous to claim that it's paranoia from the people that they're concerned that given economic crisis, government will overreach and extend its enforcement to protect its power and monopolies. I think that people's concerns there are grounded in history, and biasing people's perception of history I also just disagree with that.
Now, let's connect the dots. This is the creeping censorship state in action, a war against the freedom stack, speech, code, and money. These are signals pointing to the strong possibility that the people in charge are going to fight back when they realize that as hard as they try, they cannot censor Bitcoin. Let's start with speech. Knowing Elon Musk and his character online, it is highly unlikely that he's going to pay this fine or bend to their will. In fact, Secretary of State Marco Rubio entered the chat and said, the European Commission's $140 million fine isn't just an attack on X, it's an attack on all American tech platforms and the American people by foreign governments. The days of censoring Americans online are over. This has entirely escalated the situation.
Go f yourself.
It's pretty clear that the EU's fine isn't really about blue checks. It's about Musk refusing to bend the knee to the powers that be, who presume to define what is hate speech and disinformation. This is regulation by prosecution, skipping laws to scare innovators into submission. What's next? Any open source dev building privacy tech could be raided.
Is it a crime to insult somebody in public?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
And it's a crime to insult them online as well?
Yes.
The fine could be even higher if you insult someone in the internet.
Why?
Because in internet, it stays there.
The bureaucrats and thought police must be freaking out right now, as citizens all over Europe are striking back by downloading X as their primary news app and using Starlink to do it. Talk about a 1-2 punch. And money ties it all together. Why Bitcoin? Because it's the ultimate opt-out.
And I saw this with the digital yuan. So I wrote a lot about the digital yuan, which is kind of like the Chinese version of central bank digital currency, probably the most advanced central bank digital currency in the world right now. It's implemented in 29 cities. And I was always like, this is such a negative thing. Like, you're just giving the government directly the ability to be able to control your money, to surveil your money. You know, originally when Hal Finney talked about Bitcoin, this is exactly the dystopia that he was hedging against, and it's happening live. And the thing with that is that other countries are watching what China's doing, and even rivals to China like India and other places, Nigeria, they're thinking of implementing it, and they're implementing it by force. They're forcing people to implement CBDCs because they know people don't actually want it. And in China itself, for example, not that many people are adopting the digital yuan, but you have the Chinese state media. In Nigeria, you have like law enforcement. In China, you have law enforcement that will arrest you for trading, Bitcoin or Tether or anything else. And so the state is right now at this moment where it's trying, every state in the world, I'm trying to say, China just happens to be the most aggressive and the easiest to point to. But your country, the United States, Canada, all these different places, they are trying to take advantage of technology and try to create a system of control and political power that entrenches political structure. I mean, I can almost say forever or endlessly, right? Because if you know how people spend, if you know how people think, that's when you can control people perfectly.
Governments hate what they can't control. Your transactions, your wallet, your value. Samurai wasn't laundering. It was shielding users from surveillance. And in a world of CBDCs and tracked fiat, Bitcoin is the world's first open protocol for value they can't capture. Events like the Global Bitcoin Summit highlighted how activists use it to fight repression. Here in the US, the recent visa bans target the very people who enforce those rules, flipping the script but still weaponizing borders against ideas. Governments want a monopoly on the truth. Dissent? It's labeled disinformation and immediately shut down. If speech is the message, code is the medium. The Samurai case proves it. Arresting devs for privacy tools sets a chilling precedent. Internal docs show prosecutors ignored FinCEN's own guidance that non-custodial wallets aren't money transmitters. Petitions for samurai pardons have over 3,200 signatures. Bitcoin conferences and meetups are rallying the troops. Just like we did with Ross Ulbricht, it's our duty as Bitcoiners to opt out and support these devs. Get a hardware wallet, learn CoinJoin basics legally, of course, and support devs fighting back. Bitcoin is gaining so much traction right now that even entrenched TradFi institutions are reading the writing on the wall. Even one of the largest banks in Europe, France's BCPE Bank, surprisingly, just launched an in-app Bitcoin buying and selling. You can't stop an idea whose time has come. The authoritarian playbook: control the speech, criminalize the code, surveil the money. It's a control stack, a digital iron curtain closing in. And in 2025, with bills like the Anti-CBDC Act in play, the battle lines are drawn. Clamping down on free speech paves the way for their upcoming CBDC rollout.
A government-issued CBDC is nothing more than an Orwellian surveillance tool that will be used to erode the American way of life.
A central bank digital currency may sound like innovation, but under federal control, it becomes a powerful and dangerous tool for surveillance.
So before we wrap the show up, let's bring this home with a special message from our friends at Ledn. If you're stacking sats, you need Bitcoin-backed services you can trust. That's why we roll with Ledn, the global leader in Bitcoin-backed lending. Ledn has issued over $9 billion in loans since 2018 and a perfect record of protecting client assets. Why is a Ledn loan different? Collateral is not lent out to generate interest. No credit checks, funds in 24 hours, no monthly payments, repay whenever you want, zero penalties. And their proof of reserves, verified every 6 months, keeps them transparent. Ledn lets you unlock liquidity without selling. Sign up through Simply Bitcoin for 25 basis points off your first loan. Scan the QR code or click the link in the show notes below to get your discount today. Now, let's wrap up the show.
And our key role was to defend peer-to-peer transactions of Bitcoin, self-hosted wallets, and mixers as privacy instruments. We explained to regulators that we cannot, even if we want, to use crypto asset services providers, for example, exchanges or banking financial systems. We exclude it. It's not allowed at all in authoritarian, non-democratic states. In most of the countries in our world, it's authoritarian. It means that entire population of the globe financially excluded. If only you raise your voice against dictators, you immediately punished and you financially excluded. And the only instruments what you can use, it's actually peer-to-peer transactions, Bitcoin, and self-hosted wallets and mixers you have to use also to protect your data, also your donors and your recipients. And when I was asked, okay, how it's possible that you say that you use only Bitcoin, why you use also mixers, and why you use specifically self-hosted wallets? We explained in one very dramatic case we had in, for example, in Uzbekistan back in July 2022, when a group of human rights defenders and activist volunteers, they were fundraising. They had the only access to financial regulated institutions, it's exchanges, crypto exchanges. So they did fundraising through these exchanges. And unfortunately, on the third day of the peaceful protest in Karakal, Pakistan, these exchanges share the data with authorities of Uzbekistan, which is one of the most actually dictatorial in the world. And all these people disappeared, were sentenced for many years, were tortured. And this was one of the most painful experience.
Wow.
Why we don't have other tools.
Here's the deal. This war isn't won yet, and Bitcoin, real self-custodied Bitcoin, is probably your only way out of the monetary surveillance panopticon. Why? It's uncensorable by design. No central authority, no kill switch. Hold your keys, and no government can seize your wealth without your consent. Tools like non-custodial wallets let you transact privately, peer-to-peer, just like Satoshi envisioned. And people around the world in hostile monetary jurisdictions already use it to fund freedom. So, Why not you? If they're coming for your freedom stack, maybe you should build yours with Bitcoin before it's too late.
There seems to be a pushback against things like coin mixers because government officials are saying that they're used for money laundering and illicit activities. So what is that position of defense that you go out there and you simply say, this is why we need to be able to have these privacy tools?
So first of all, as I mentioned, we don't have other tools and we have to have rights to actually protect our financial freedom. It's not something what we just wish. It's our necessity. It's our human rights. We need to have right for privacy and we defend it, especially in the countries where no other financial and payment fundraising tools for entire human rights defenders, opposition leaders, journalists, and activists. And normally all democratic countries, they support it. They want us to support us. They ask us how we can reform banking system. And I have no answer for it. Because how you can protect a banking system from being abused if it's just a continuation of weapon? It's an arm in the, in the hands of dictators, and they use it exactly against everyone who is opposing the government. So you need to have independent payment instrument, fundraising instruments, which allows you to protect, for example, from abuses like in Kazakhstan, where transactions of activists can be blocked 3 to 5 minutes. Kazakhstan is able to identify in Stripe network specific transactions of activists who are fundraising for families of political prisoners and block it in 5 minutes. Imagine the speed and capacity, what they do. What we advise Financial Action Task Force and State Department and senators of US actually to consider not to disclose instruments of intelligence of democracies, not to empower all of the dictatorial countries to abuse financial instruments and surveillance instruments against civil society. They should not treat financial institutions of authoritarian states and financial institutions of democracies equally. This is what we right now see in travel rule of Financial Action Task Force. And this is what we also advocate to change. Otherwise, we will be always in a weak position and all of our data will be abused by dictators.
If this fired you up, smash the like button, share with your fellow plebs and comment. What is your escape plan? Bitcoin or bust? I will see you guys in the next video. And for now, remember to stack, slay, and stay bullish, baby.